Hey everybody, welcome to another video. We're going to be doing something a little bit different for the next little while. I'm starting not exactly a series, but I'm going to go on a little thread here for a few weeks. We're doing this new thing called the Alt Logic Manual. And essentially what my vision is that, I love the Logic Pro manual and it's great to be able to go through there, but I want to do an alternate to that that's all video based and covers topics in a different order and to a different depth. And so what we're going to be doing is releasing weekly videos that are all part of this chain of videos that are the Alt Logic Manual. Now, the one thing about this is this first one we're releasing first here on YouTube, and then subsequent videos are going to be released on our Facebook page. This new page, which we've created, is really designed to build a community around learning a lot of the basics and the setup for Logic. So check out the link in the description below. Head over there. All the videos will be released there first, and then a few days later they'll show up on YouTube. But if you want to get them right when they're released, then just join the free Facebook page, and we can talk about things over there. People can ask questions. It's going to be one of those Logic groups that is going to be really serious about learning Logic, and we're going to keep a lot of the fluff off of there. And I've noticed with some of the other Logic groups right now on Facebook that there's a lot of stuff that's a distraction rather than helpful. So we're going to really narrow this down, laser-like focus on mastering Logic. So check out that link. Like I said, come over, join the group, and we're going to be posting all of the videos there first, and then you'll be able to see them on YouTube some point afterwards. So today what we're going to be looking at is one of the things that I teach students very first when we're looking at Logic, and that is the audio MIDI setup. This is an application or a utility which comes with OS X. It's been around for a while now. There's really two places you can find it. One of them would be in the other category here, inside your Launchpad, or we can also find it in the Finder under Applications, down at the bottom under Utilities. And so you'll see it right here. So either one of those places. It has three primary windows. It has the audio devices, the MIDI Studio, and then the network device browser. We're not doing too much with the network device browser today since I don't even have a compatible interface, but there are some interfaces which this is compatible with, and you can do a little bit of management of those. Thinking primarily some of the Motu devices. Anyway, what we're going to look at are primarily the MIDI Studio and the audio devices today. Both of these do a lot, and it's interesting. You may have been using Logic for years and never even gone into these because technically Logic is able to kind of supersede control and take any kind of MIDI input and run its own output for audio. However, there's some things in here which I think are really valuable. And so we're going to look at those right now. So first, inside the audio devices, we have a list of all of our audio devices that are connected or installed. You can see I've got my built-in output, and we have a number of other things. We have two Steinbergs. I've got two connected right now. Each of those are 2 ins and 2 outs. We have a black hole driver. This is a free MIDI or a free audio router, so I can route audio between different applications inside my computer. We have this iShow, which came with some screen capture at some point, and then Telestream audio capture, which is what I use with ScreenFlow, which I'm using to make these tutorials. Then I've got one multi-output device, which we can look at in just a minute. So each of these allow us to see the capabilities. We don't get too much control. Most of the time, this is how we use it when we organize it for the system rather than for Logic. Although every once in a while, I do have to come in here and make sure that the sample rate that it's set to is matching whatever I'm using it for. Input and outputs, pretty straightforward. So it's a great place to be able to just kind of peek at what you have. The black hole device has 16 different channels. And then the other Steinberg, etc., all pretty similar. So then what would we use this for in terms of Logic? things that we couldn't do in Logic directly. Well, a couple of them happen down here. For instance, we can do, with the plus, we can create an aggregate device or a multi-output device. And both of these are really useful in some situations. The aggregate device is useful in the case like this, where I have these two Steinberg interfaces. And so each of them do 2 in and 2 out. Say I want to pretend like it's a 4-channel interface. So I can actually click on both of the Steinbergs. And all of a sudden I have a new device called the aggregate device. And I can call this the UR22 4-channel, right? And when I pop this down, you can see both of them in there. One of them has the master clock, or the clock source rather. And the other one follows that clocking source. Now I could add other things as well. I could add all of these and make one big device, but it does end up causing some problems with latency and things in the long run. So let's load up Logic for a second. And I'm going to choose this interface, the one I just created, as my new interface. And we'll see what it says in terms of latency. Because if you don't have low latency, then it doesn't matter how many devices you connect together. It doesn't help. And that's because you really need to be able to record with low latency. So here's my UR22 4-channel. Right, like that. Let's hit choose. Sample rate is correct. Frame rate doesn't matter in this case. So let's make an audio channel. Check, 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 check. And let's choose an input. We have 4 inputs, just like I was expecting. And I can hear this. You probably can't because it's not going through the ScreenFlow. So we'll just mute that for a moment. But let's check out our audio preferences. And you can see it's not terrific. Let's just switch this to one of those individually. So 16, I guess it's actually not bad. It's about the same. Built-in output. And that one's even longer. So it's right down there with the shortest specific millisecond latency. That's great. Okay, so that's one really useful thing. Another thing that I do sometimes is this multi-output device, which looks similar to the aggregate, except we just have outputs and not inputs. The nice thing about Logic is that I can set a separate input anyway. So I'm just creating the output device. And I send the output to my Steinberg as well as to the black hole. And so I can set the input on anything else and it will get the output of Logic. In this case, I use it for Zoom when I'm doing online lectures or meetings. I can actually send my Logic output just like this through the black hole into Zoom. And then people will hear what the output of Logic is. Nice high quality format for this. So that's why I would use the multi-output device. Okay, that's really it in terms of the audio devices for when it comes to Logic. Now let's look at the MIDI Studio. This is a little bit more complicated, and it's also doesn't have to be because you can literally just plug things into Logic and have them work. But there are a few things here that are important. So this keeps track of all of the MIDI devices which are connected to our computer. And you can see I've got 2 of the Steinbergs. They both have MIDI ports on them, so that's why they're here. I have a MIO4 attached as well. And this has a bunch of MIDI interface going on. And then I've got an Axiom, which isn't right now connected, but it could be. It has a MIDI port as well. And then a Touche, which I sometimes use, and that's not connected right now. It's grayed out. And then you can see all of my mobile devices with the IDAM protocol. This allows us to connect our iOS devices as both an audio and as a MIDI input. And so we're going to look at that. That's where we'll actually cross back over to audio devices in just a little bit, because the two actually overlap just a little bit. Okay, so these, for instance, they're not all connected, and I need to reconnect them anyway, so I'm just going to delete them. These two right here, I'll recreate them if I need to when I remake or reattach them at some point. The IAC driver is interesting. It's like the black hole driver, but for MIDI. That means I can send MIDI data across this from application to application. So from Logic to Pro Tools, or Pro Tools to Ableton, or whatever. And so that's part of it right there. Now, if you don't see that as an option in your applications, could be that the device is not set to online. So you want to make sure you turn it on so that it's working. And then you can see the properties here. These are all standard things for any of the things we look at, what ports they have, what properties, the MIDI CI, which has to do with MIDI 2.0. You can see that right now nothing is supported with that. That's the newer stuff coming down the chain. Hopefully in the next year or so, we'll see a lot more with that compatibility with the new MIDI 2.0 and the old stuff. But this is the IAC driver. So it's really just a portal, internal portal on your computer. Now here's where we also can set up Bluetooth MIDI. So if you have an app on a device or an instrument that does Bluetooth, we could advertise this and make connections. I don't have one of those set up ready to go right now. I don't use the Bluetooth stuff very often. I think it's still relatively not great in terms of latency. It's okay. It's not great. But we can also set up our network MIDI. And this is interesting. You can actually send MIDI from your computer to another computer over your wireless network. Or even further, if you want, you can connect over the internet through this, create a MIDI back and forth with somebody across the world. It's interesting stuff too, but this is where you would do it. But in terms of practical stuff, what we do have in here are external devices which we could connect. So let's just make one of these. And let's double click on it. And I use this for a lot of my older gear. If I have something from any of these manufacturers, these do not come, these names that are populated here do not come from Logic or your system. These are all installed when certain software gets installed. So for instance, when you install Pro Tools, it's really good about bringing this stuff along so you can actually get this list. And it's important in some ways because it adds some functionality. So I install Pro Tools, at least one of the licenses I have, anytime I have a MIDI setup going on, just because it makes it a little bit easier with some older gear. As an example, if we click on Kurzweil, you can see all the Kurzweil options here. Say we have a K2000, right? Or actually, maybe let's do something else like Roland. You can see a lot of the Roland gears, Roland different things here. So XV5050, say you picked one up at a garage sale or something. So it shows up out here. The best part, though, happens a little bit later. Say we connect the output of one of my Steinbergs into this. This is nice because in a lot of different applications, let's make a new external MIDI track for a second. Now you can see I've got an XV5050 automatically listed, right? That's kind of nice. And then it has all the channels there. And then it has the patches and things that you can program with it. These are actually general MIDI, but with a lot of this, some of these you can actually go in and see. It will populate the programs and the banks so you can actually see what you're programming. But it just adds another layer of automatic functionality inside Logic if you have a piece of gear that matches anything on that list. It gives you a little bit more information. So that's one thing that the MIDI Studio is really good for. Another thing then is if we're using the IDAM protocol, let me get my cable here and hook up my phone. And so you're going to see a couple things pop up. We have to update our system a little bit. I have the new iOS 14 installed, but this isn't the new OS 10 yet. So it's right in between before the new OS 10 gets released, but after the iOS 14 gets released. So you'll have to do this little patch. It'll automatically do it when you plug it in. So not a big deal. But it does take just a minute to do it. So I'm going to pause and come back when this is done. Okay, so we're back. That just took maybe a minute and a half total to do. But now over here on my audio devices side, you'll see my phone listed here as an option. I'd have to enable it in order to actually do anything with it. But once I enable it, it becomes an audio input option, which I can do an aggregate device with if I wanted to. So I could do an aggregate device with my phone and the two Steinberg devices. Kind of handy. And then once that's done, we'll also see the MIDI option pop up in the MIDI Studio. So it's taken a little bit longer than expected here. Okay, so now that all pops up. It asks in Logic, do we want to use this? I'm going to say don't use for the moment. But you'll see this pops up on the MIDI Studio side now. I can double click on it. You can see just a little bit about it. You can see that there's the one port. So we have 16 channels, capable of doing some of the other normal general MIDI type stuff, transmitting and receiving. So this is cool. It doesn't allow you to connect like we did with other things because it's connecting to your phone only. But now, say over here, if I wanted to do this, I could add in the phone as an additional option inside Logic. Or because I have the UR22 4-channel thing already selected. Let's do that again over here. Apply. And it's still the 17 milliseconds round trip. Pretty awesome. But anything I do on my phone now, MIDI-wise or audio-wise, is going to go over here. And also I can, if I want to, I can send stuff directly to my phone MIDI-wise or receive it from my phone MIDI-wise as well. So this thing right here with the phone, and this applies equally to the iPad, iPad Pro, iPad Air. But this alone is so valuable in a studio, and you have to use the MIDI Studio to set it up. And then we can record from it, we can hear back, so we can use an external instrument inside Logic. This is one of the great things we can do now. So I can, on an instrument track, under Utility, load up external instrument, MIDI, iPhone, input. In this case, it was 5 and 6 from the iPhone, from our aggregate device. And there we have it. So now my iPhone is an instrument on a track inside Logic, all because of the audio MIDI setup. Now, some of that inside the Logic side was more advanced, and as a part of this alt manual, we're definitely going to go through some of that. So just giving you the big picture on why this audio MIDI setup is so important and so valuable when you set up your overall system in your home studio or wherever. This is where we're going to be doing so many of these connections to make them all work together and have a studio that plays nicely. Okay, that's it for this. The last thing I'll say about it all is that we can test out our studio a little bit here. So this is a possibility. If we wanted to actually test out what we're doing here, we can do that here. And it should be able to show us various things. So I'm going to turn on my MIDI keyboard for a second. And you can see when I play a key on my keyboard, right there, played it, it lights up with blue showing me exactly where it's connected. So I've got that connected into this, looks like the fourth 5-pin MIDI cable port on that MIO4. So that's super helpful to be able to test it out and see where things are connected. If you have a bunch of things connected, this is a great place to troubleshoot to make sure they're in the right place and that everything's receiving things from the right places as well. Okay, that was a lot, but this is an example now of all the videos we're going to be doing after this for this alt manual. We're going to go through each of the components for setting up, for getting your system just how you want it, so that when you push record, you're ready to go and able to make the best recording, most musical recording without having to worry about the technology. If you enjoyed this, let me know down in the comments, but more importantly, go over to the Facebook group, join it, and wait for more videos to come. Again, we're going to be doing them once a week, so stay tuned and get ready for those.